It was really this anarchistic VS
and there was
a
bit of anarchism in it too, yes.
Well, we wanted to sort of put flesh and blood to this abstract discussion of democracy in school. And we wanted to further democracy by information.
But if the Little Red Schoolbook was neither as Marxist or Maoist or as filthy as its critics claimed, could the fuss behind it have been because it got caught up in the crossfire of international events?
I think the authorities were aware it was related to attacks on Vietnam and the, make love, not war.
But it was all peace on the march. Cool it, they told each other, don't spoil it now. They had made their point, their massive protest.
And the student unrest and the student rebellion.
Bricks, rocks, and bottles shattered at least a score of the windows. Red paint splattered the stone structure in 2 places. Rebel flags were attached to the building.
And I think they saw, that there were quiverings of anti-capitalist feeling or Marxist feeling that, without actually pinpointing it perhaps, that this belonged in a sequence of other things.
11 policemen were hurt. One hospital treated 20 injured. There were 31 arrests.
This little book was, of course, a small part of the general, uprising is a too big a word, but the movement of students and young people.
Very few were over 35. Most were in their early 20s. Some who watched from the downtown office buildings gave the peace sign in support of the demonstrators. Others who looked down didn't like what they saw.
In America, of course, it started perhaps in the civil rights movement in America. And then went on to Paris with the student uprising there.
This demonstration is in the Latin Quarter for the reopening of the Sorbonne. Tomorrow, it might be to put pressure on the negotiation.
I see this little book as a part of this movement, the '68 movement, and what happened during this year and a couple of the following years. It's a part of that, an anti-authoritarian movement and a wish to have democracy from below.
Yeah, the Little Red Schoolbook, as an icon, was part of that whole period of political protest. It was, dramatic times. Very hard to imagine 30 years later how intense it was. It wasn't only about the argument about the Vietnam War. It wasn't only about conscription. It was also about an incredibly intense clash of civilizations.
The Weatherman faction of the Students for a Democratic Society, which finds something close to moral virtue in street fighting, tried to serve an eviction notice on the South Vietnamese embassy here.
Yes, we were very inspired, I think, by the underground movement overseas. We're inspired by France, 1968. We're inspired by things like that were happening in Chicago, huge demonstrations. All of that was what we read, and to some extent we actually reflected that in what we published.
It isn't very different in the United States. As you know, very many of America's cities are financially as well as intellectually and morally bankrupt. Many of them have become centres of violence and really centres of guerrilla insurgency. I'm absolutely certain that Mr. Chip does not want Australia to go down along this road.
And a lot of us had that thought that the society would never change and we would just go on living free in our own underground way and publishing our papers and magazines and distributing them.
It's time to begin. Yes, it's time.
Some people saw possibility of change of the law.
Time for freedom. Time for moving.
But most of us, I think, felt that it was going to go on like this forever.
It's time to begin. Yes, it's time.
We didn't realise that liberation was on its way.
Time for children.
We didn't realise that we were going to get a government in Australia not long after that that would in fact have very similar tastes and interests to us, and that therefore a lot of change would come about naturally.
Yes, it's time.
So we fought it as if there was no help on our side.
Can the fuss over the Little Red Schoolbook, though, really be attributable to the fact that it was part of the spirit of youthful rebellion, the changing times, both here and abroad? Or were there deeper reasons than that?
There was a real concern that the other sections, the other 3/4 of the book, which was about empowerment, challenged authority, particularly in the education system, and that this was a battle that authority had to win, otherwise they would lose control. The inmates would be running the asylum.
Demonstrations. If, for example, you don't want to have to line up in the playground, demonstrate by just going straight into the classrooms. If you're dissatisfied with a certain teacher and he refuses to talk to you, organise a strike. Get everybody to stay out in the playground during his lessons all day.
So it had a political motive. And the politicians saw the political motive.
Well, it now seems that this student protest, which started in the universities, is spreading to schools. Very briefly, what would your reaction be if in the next few days your pupils organised a strike after reading this book?
Well, in the first place, I don't particularly like the idea of strikes.
Could you be more specific about your objections?
Well, I don't think there's the slightest necessity for them to have a strike, because most of the freedoms that the book advocates we have had for years.
It must be a wonderful school, Miss Manners.
I like to think that it is. They're wonderful children.
Thank you very much indeed, all of you.